A policeman attacked P. Diddy, accusing him of kidnapping a white girl. However, the truth that came out later shocked everyone. Find out what happened. Subscribe and write in the comments where you're watching us from. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the sprawling park. Families, couples, and friends dotted the paths, their laughter and chatter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Children squealed with delight as they chased each other around the playground or darted toward the ice cream truck parked near the entrance. It was a scene of perfect serenity, the kind of afternoon that seemed immune to trouble. For Lily, a 6-year-old girl with a wild imagination and a boundless curiosity, the park was a wonderland. She was dressed in her favorite pink dress, its hem fluttering as she twirled with joy. Her blonde curls bounced with each step, catching the light and making her look like a living doll. She clutched a blue helium balloon in one hand, a gift from her father earlier that day, and skipped ahead of her parents, her sandals clicking rhythmically against the pavement. Her parents, Rebecca and Daniel, strolled behind her, their hands intertwined. They had planned this trip as a much-needed break from their hectic lives. Both in their early 30s, they carried the polished exhaustion of young professionals juggling work and family. Rebecca, in her floral sundress, carried a tote bag filled with snacks and sunscreen, while Daniel, tall and slightly rumpled in his khaki shorts and polo shirt, sipped from a coffee cup he'd insisted on bringing along. "Lily, stay where we can see you," Rebecca called out as Lily veered toward the carousel. The girl glanced back and waved, her face lit with mischief. Rebecca exchanged a knowing smile with Daniel. "She's always so full of energy," she murmured, "just like her dad." They continued their leisurely pace, pausing occasionally to admire a street performer's juggling act or the watercolor paintings for sale along the walkway. Lily, meanwhile, was enchanted by the carousel. Its painted horses bobbed up and down to the cheerful tune of a calliope, and children laughed as they spun around. Lily tugged at her balloon string, wondering if she might ride it later. As she turned to call out to her parents, something caught her eye. A bright red balloon floating free into the sky. It drifted higher and higher, a stark contrast against the deepening blue. Lily's heart leapt. Her own balloon, tied securely around her wrist, suddenly felt inadequate. She needed to see where that red balloon would go. Without thinking, she took a step, then another, her gaze fixed upward. The laughter and music faded into the background as Lily wandered further. The carousel disappeared behind a grove of oak trees, their thick branches shielding her from view. She didn't notice the way the crowd thinned or how the familiar path transformed into unfamiliar trails. All that mattered was the red balloon, now a tiny speck against the horizon. When she finally stopped, realizing the balloon was gone, Lily blinked and looked around. Her parents were nowhere to be seen. The carousel, the paintings, even the ice cream truck, everything that had been a part of her magical afternoon had vanished. Instead, she stood in an unfamiliar part of the park, surrounded by towering trees and the distant hum of traffic. "Mommy?" she called out, her voice small and uncertain. She turned in circles, clutching the string of her balloon as if it might guide her back. "Daddy?" Her calls grew louder, edged with panic. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She sniffled and wiped at her face with her free hand, trying to stay calm. But the enormity of the moment was sinking in. She was alone. People passed her, their faces blurred and indifferent. A man in a suit glanced at her briefly before continuing his phone call. A woman jogging by didn't even pause. Lily's cries became more frantic. "Mommy! Daddy!" Her balloon bobbed above her head, its cheerful blue at odds with her growing fear. She slumped onto a bench near the path, hugging her knees to her chest. Her pink dress crumpled, and her curls clung damply to her cheeks. The world felt impossibly big, and she felt impossibly small. For the first time that day, the park wasn't a wonderland. It was a labyrinth, and she had no idea how to find her way out. It was then that she noticed him, a tall man approaching slowly from the other end of the path. He wasn't like the others who had passed her by. His pace was measured, his gaze attentive. He wore a simple white t-shirt and jeans with a black baseball cap pulled low over his face. In one hand he held a bottle of water, and in the other, a small bag from a nearby deli. As he got closer, Lily could see his face more clearly. His skin was a deep, rich brown, and his features were strong but kind. He looked down at her, his expression softening as he saw the tears streaking her cheeks. "Hey there," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Are you okay?" Lily stared at him, her lips trembling. She wasn't sure if she should answer. Her parents had always told her not to talk to strangers, but this man didn't seem scary. In fact, there was something common about the way he spoke, the way he crouched down to her level instead of towering over her. "Are you lost?" he asked, keeping his distance. "It's okay. I can help. I can't find my mommy and daddy," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded, his expression serious. "That sounds scary. My name's Shawn. What's yours?" "Lily," she said, clutching the string of her balloon tighter. "Well, Lily," Shawn said, "how about we figure this out together? I can call the park security, or we can go find a safe place to wait for your parents. Does that sound okay?" Lily hesitated. The tears in her eyes made everything blurry, but Shawn's voice was steady and kind. He didn't rush her or demand answers. He waited, giving her space to decide. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." Shawn smiled and stood, extending a hand. "Let's go find your family, Lily." Her small hand slipped into his, and for the first time since she'd realized she was lost, she felt a flicker of hope. They started walking down the path together, her balloon bobbing gently above them as the golden sunlight began to fade into twilight. The path ahead was lined with trees that swayed gently in the cooling breeze. The park's once vibrant energy was now muted, the golden sunlight giving way to a deepening dusk. Lily's small hand gripped Shawn's tightly as they walked. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see her parents running toward her, but all she saw were scattered joggers and couples strolling hand in hand. Shawn noticed her nervous glances and squeezed her hand lightly. "We'll find them," he said, his voice low and soothing. "I promise." Lily looked up at him, her wide blue eyes filled with uncertainty. "How do you know?" Shawn paused for a moment, considering his words. "Because I've been lost before, too," he said finally, a faint smile playing on his lips. "And someone helped me. Now it's my turn to help you." They continued walking, the faint hum of traffic from the nearby streets blending with the occasional chirp of crickets. Shawn kept his pace slow, matching Lily's small steps. He wanted to make sure she didn't feel rushed or overwhelmed. "You're not a stranger," Lily said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You're nice." Shawn chuckled softly. "Well, thank you, Lily, but your parents are smart to teach you to be careful. The world isn't always a nice place." She didn't quite understand what he meant, but his tone made her feel safe. Shawn's presence was calm and steady, like an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. As they walked, Shawn pointed out small things to distract her: a squirrel darting up a tree, a cluster of fireflies flickering like tiny stars in the bushes, a kite tangled in the branches overhead. Lily's grip on his hand loosened slightly as her curiosity began to outweigh her fear. "Do you think my mommy and daddy are scared?" she asked, her voice small. Shawn stopped walking and crouched down to her level. "I think they're probably very worried," he said honestly, "but they know you're a smart, brave girl and they'll do everything they can to find you." Lily nodded, her lip quivering. "I miss them." "I know," Shawn said softly. "We'll get you back to them, I promise." They reached a small clearing where a group of teenagers were skateboarding, their laughter echoing through the air. Shawn hesitated, unsure if this was the best route to take. He glanced down at Lily, who was watching the skaters with wide eyes. "Do you like skateboarding?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's loud." Shawn nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it is. Let's go this way instead." He led her down a quieter path, away from the noise. The trees grew denser here, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Shawn glanced around, making sure they weren't venturing too far from the main park area. "Did you know," he said, breaking the silence, "that squirrels can remember where they bury hundreds of nuts, even months later?" Lily looked up at him, her brows furrowed. "Really?" "Really," Shawn said, smiling. "Pretty impressive, huh?" Lily giggled. "I forget where I put my toys all the time." "Me too," Shawn admitted, grinning. "But I bet if you were a squirrel you'd remember everything." The corners of Lily's mouth lifted into a shy smile. For the first time since they'd started walking, she seemed a little less afraid. As they continued, Shawn's thoughts began to drift. Lily's trust in him was humbling, but it also weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had to get this right. Memories of his own childhood surfaced, unbidden, a time when he had been the one in need of help. Shawn was 12 when it happened. He had been at a crowded mall with his mother, who was rushing to finish her Christmas shopping. The mall was a whirlwind of noise and lights, and in the chaos, Shawn had wandered off to look at a display of sneakers. When he turned around, his mother was gone. Panic had set in quickly. He had called out for her, his voice drowned by the festive music and chatter of the crowd. A security guard eventually found him sitting on a bench, trying not to cry. The guard had been kind, asking Shawn his name and paging his mother over the intercom. It had taken what felt like forever, but she had come running, her face a mix of relief and frustration. That experience had stuck with Shawn. He knew what it felt like to be small and scared in a big, indifferent world. It was one of the reasons he had stopped when he saw Lily sitting alone on that bench. He couldn't have walked away, even if he wanted to. Lily tugged on his hand, pulling him out of his thoughts. "Shawn, are we close to my mommy and daddy?" Shawn knelt down again, meeting her gaze. "I don't know yet, but we're getting closer. I can feel it." Lily tilted her head. "How can you feel it?" Shawn smiled. "It's like when you know it's going to rain because you can smell it in the air. Sometimes you just know." She seemed to accept this, her small shoulders relaxing slightly. They walked on in silence for a while, the sounds of the park growing quieter as the evening deepened. Eventually, they came to a fork in the path. One side led back toward the main park area where the street lights were beginning to flicker on. The other led to a quieter, less traveled part of the park. Shawn hesitated, unsure which way to go. "What do you think, Lily?" he asked. "Left or right?" Lily considered the paths, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Left," she said finally. "It looks brighter." Shawn nodded. "Good choice." As they turned left, Shawn's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from his assistant, reminding him of a meeting he was supposed to attend later that evening. He frowned, then quickly dismissed the thought. The meeting could wait. Right now, nothing was more important than getting Lily home. "Is that my mommy?" Lily asked, eyeing the phone. Shawn shook his head. "Not yet, but we'll find a way to call her soon." They walked a little further before the path opened up into a small plaza. There was a fountain in the center, its water glinting in the dim light. A group of children played nearby, their parents sitting on benches and chatting. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight. "Do you think they've seen my mommy and daddy?" she asked, tugging on Shawn's hand. "Let's find out," he said, leading her toward the group. As they approached, Shawn felt a pang of unease. He knew that some people might find it strange, a tall black man walking hand in hand with a little white girl. He braced himself for the inevitable questions, the wary looks. But for Lily's sake, he pushed those thoughts aside. This wasn't about him. He crouched down to Lily's level again. "Do you want to ask them, or should I?" Lily hesitated, then pointed to a woman with kind eyes sitting on a nearby bench. "Her," she said softly. Shawn nodded. "Good choice." Together, they approached the woman. Shawn smiled politely. "Excuse me, ma'am. This little girl's lost her parents. Have you seen anyone looking for a child around here?" The woman looked at Lily, then at Shawn. Her expression shifted slightly, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Shawn felt the familiar weight of judgment settle over him, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "I'm just trying to help her," he said, holding her gaze. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "I haven't seen anyone, but maybe someone else has." Shawn nodded. "Thank you." As they turned away, Lily clung to his hand a little tighter. Shawn glanced down at her, his heart sinking at the thought of how long this search might take. But he forced a smile and said, "We'll keep looking, okay?" Lily nodded, her trust in him unwavering. Together, they walked back toward the main path, the plaza fading into the distance behind them. The plaza faded into the background as Shawn and Lily continued along the path, the faint glow of streetlights guiding their way. The sounds of the park had dwindled, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirp of crickets. The air was cooler now, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and freshly cut grass. Lily's steps had grown smaller and slower. Her tiny hand was still clasped in Shawn's, but her grip had loosened, her energy waning after hours of walking and searching. Shawn glanced down at her, noticing the tired droop of her shoulders and the way she rubbed at her eyes with her free hand. "Hey, how about we take a little break?" Shawn suggested, crouching down to her level. "There's a bench up ahead. You can rest your feet for a bit." Lily nodded, her curls bobbing, and allowed him to guide her toward the bench. She climbed up onto it, swinging her legs back and forth as Shawn rummaged through the bag he'd been carrying. He pulled out a small bottle of water and handed it to her. "Here, take a sip," he said. "It's important to stay hydrated." Lily took the bottle with both hands, her fingers barely wrapping around its circumference. She sipped carefully, her gaze wandering to the darkened trees that bordered the path. "Do you think Mommy and Daddy are looking for me right now?" she asked, her voice small and tentative. Shawn nodded. "Absolutely. They're probably searching everywhere. And we're going to make it easier for them by staying strong and keeping calm, okay?" Lily looked at him, her blue eyes shimmering with a mix of hope and exhaustion. "Okay," she whispered. Shawn leaned back against the bench, letting out a quiet sigh. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had no idea how much longer it would take to find Lily's parents, but he couldn't let her see his uncertainty. She needed him to be her rock, her anchor in the midst of this storm. As they sat there, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Shawn straightened instinctively, his body tensing. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in the navy blue uniform of a police officer. His badge glinted under the streetlight, and his hand rested on the holster at his hip. The officer's gaze locked onto Shawn and Lily, and his expression hardened. His steps quickened as he approached, the sound of his boots echoing against the pavement. Shawn felt his chest tighten. He'd faced this kind of scrutiny before, those moments when strangers looked at him and saw only the color of his skin, not the person he was. "Evening," the officer said, his tone clipped and suspicious. His eyes darted between Shawn and Lily. "What's going on here?" Shawn rose slowly to his feet, keeping his hands visible. He could feel Lily's fingers clutching at his shirt, her small frame pressed against his leg. "This little girl got separated from her parents," Shawn explained evenly. "I'm helping her find them." The officer's gaze narrowed. "Separated, huh? And who exactly are you?" "My name's Shawn," he replied. "I was walking through the park when I saw her sitting alone. She told me she was lost, so I offered to help." The officer didn't look convinced. He shifted his stance, his hand lingering near his holster. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Shawn forced himself to stay calm, even as his pulse quickened. "You can ask her yourself," he said, nodding toward Lily. "She'll tell you the same thing." The officer's eyes flicked to Lily, who was now hiding behind Shawn's leg, her face half buried in his jeans. "Hey, sweetheart," the officer said, his tone softening slightly. "Is this man bothering you?" Lily peeked out cautiously, her voice trembling as she answered, "No, he's helping me." The officer's jaw tightened. He straightened, his hand still hovering near his weapon. "I think you'd better step away from her," he said to Shawn, "just to be safe." Shawn clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tightening. He wanted to protest, to demand why his word wasn't enough, but he knew that raising his voice would only escalate the situation. Instead, he took a slow step back, keeping his hands in plain sight. "Look," he said, his voice measured, "I understand your concern, but I'm not a threat. I just want to make sure she gets back to her parents safely." The officer's eyes bore into him, unyielding and accusatory. "I don't know you," he said flatly, "and I don't take chances when it comes to kids." Before Shawn could respond, Lily stepped forward, her small hand reaching out to grasp his. "He's my friend," she said firmly, her voice shaken but determined. "He's helping me find Mommy and Daddy." The officer hesitated, his expression flickering with uncertainty. He looked at Lily, then back at Shawn, as if weighing his options. Finally, he stepped back slightly, though his posture remained tense. "All right," he said gruffly, "but I'm going to need some identification." Shawn nodded, pulling his wallet from his pocket and handing over his ID. The officer studied it, his brows furrowing as he read the name. "Shawn Combs?" he repeated, glancing up. "That name sounds familiar." "I'm better known as P. Diddy," Shawn said, his tone even. "I'm a musician and entrepreneur. You can verify that if you need to." The officer's expression remained guarded. He reached for his radio, relaying the information to dispatch. A few moments later, a voice crackled back through the speaker, confirming Shawn's identity. The officer's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the suspicion in his eyes didn't entirely fade. "All right," he said, handing back the ID, "but I'll be keeping an eye on you." Shawn bit back a sharp retort, knowing it would do no good. Instead, he crouched down beside Lily, his voice soft. "You okay, kiddo?" She nodded, her lip trembling. "I don't like him," she whispered, glancing at the officer. Shawn gave her a reassuring smile. "It's okay. We're going to keep moving, all right?" Lily nodded again, and Shawn rose to his feet. He glanced at the officer, his expression calm but firm. "We'll be on our way." The officer stepped aside, watching them closely as they continued down the path. Shawn could feel the weight of his gaze on his back, but he refused to let it shake him. He focused on Lily, on her safety, and on the promise he had made to her. As they walked away, Lily reached up and tugged on his sleeve. "Shawn? Yeah? Why was he so mean to you?" Shawn hesitated, the question hitting him like a punch to the gut. How could he explain something so complicated to someone so young? "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people don't understand each other. And when they don't understand, they can act in ways that aren't fair." Lily frowned, her brows knitting together. "That's not nice." "No," Shawn agreed, "it's not." They walked on in silence, the tension from the encounter lingering like a shadow. Shawn's mind churned with a mix of frustration and sadness, but he pushed those feelings aside. Lily needed him to be strong, to stay focused on the task at hand. Ahead, the path began to slope upward, leading toward the lights of the city beyond the park. Shawn tightened his grip on Lily's hand, silently vowing that no matter what obstacles they faced, he wouldn't let her down. The tension of the encounter with the officer still lingered as Shawn and Lily made their way up the sloping path. The city lights in the distance shimmered like a beacon, a promise of safety and familiarity. But for Shawn, the weight of the evening pressed down like a heavy stone. Lily, clutching his hand tightly, seemed more tired than ever, her steps dragging slightly as the adrenaline that had carried her this far began to wane. Shawn glanced down at her, noting the faint smudges under her eyes and the way her curls clung damply to her cheeks. "You hanging in there, kiddo?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, but her voice was small. "I'm tired." "I know," Shawn said. "We're almost there. Just a little further, okay?" "Okay," she murmured, though she didn't sound convinced. As they crested the hill, the park opened up into another plaza, this one larger and busier than the last. A fountain gurgled in the center, its water sparkling under the glow of overhead lights. Families, couples, and groups of friends milled about, their voices blending into a low hum of conversation and laughter. The sight of so many people gave Shawn a flicker of hope. Surely someone here could help, or at the very least might recognize Lily. Lily seemed to perk up slightly at the sight of the crowd. "Do you think my mommy and daddy are here?" she asked, her voice tinged with hope. "They might be," Shawn said, though he didn't want to make any promises he couldn't keep. "Let's look around and ask if anyone's seen them." They moved cautiously into the plaza, weaving through the clusters of people. Shawn kept a firm grip on Lily's hand, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of a frantic-looking couple searching for a child. But as they walked, he couldn't help but notice the curious glances they were drawing. Some were fleeting, barely noticeable, while others lingered, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to outright suspicion. Shawn was used to this. He had spent his life navigating spaces where he was seen first as a black man and second as anything else. But tonight, with Lily's small hand in his, the stares felt heavier, sharper, like tiny needles pricking at his skin. He kept his focus on the task at hand, refusing to let the weight of those gazes slow him down. They approached a group of teenagers sitting on a low stone wall near the fountain. One of them, a girl with bright pink hair and a leather jacket, looked up as they approached. Shawn offered a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said. "We're looking for this little girl's parents. Have you seen anyone who looks like they're searching for a child?" The girl exchanged a glance with her friends before shaking her head. "Sorry, haven't seen anyone like that." "Thanks anyway," Shawn said, nodding. As they turned to leave, one of the other teens, a boy with a skateboard propped against his leg, muttered something under his breath. Shawn didn't catch the words, but the sneering tone was unmistakable. He felt a flash of irritation but pushed it aside. Lily didn't need him to react. She needed him to stay calm and focused. They moved on to another group, this one a family seated on a bench near the edge of the plaza. The parents, a man and a woman in their 40s, were watching their two young children chase each other around the fountain. Shawn approached them cautiously, aware of the wary glances they cast in his direction. "Sorry to bother you," he began, "but this little girl is lost and we're trying to find her parents. Have you seen anyone who might be looking for her?" The man frowned, his gaze shifting between Shawn and Lily. "No, we haven't," he said curtly. The woman, however, leaned forward slightly, her expression softening as she looked at Lily. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Lily nodded, though she clung to Shawn's hand a little tighter. "I want my mommy," she said, her voice trembling. The woman's eyes flicked back to Shawn, and for a moment, her concern seemed to outweigh her suspicion. "We'll keep an eye out," she said. "If we see anyone, we'll let you know." "Thank you," Shawn said, his voice steady despite the knot of frustration tightening in his chest. As they moved away, Shawn felt Lily tug on his hand. "Why doesn't anyone know where they are?" she asked, her voice cracking. Shawn crouched down beside her, his heart aching at the sight of her tear-streaked face. "Sometimes it takes a little while to find what you're looking for," he said gently. "But we're not giving up, okay? We'll keep trying." Lily nodded, sniffling. "Okay." They continued their search, stopping to ask more people, but the answers were always the same. No one had seen a couple looking for a lost child. The stares and murmurs followed them everywhere, a constant reminder of how out of place they looked together. Shawn's patience was wearing thin, but he refused to let it show. Lily needed him to stay strong, and he wouldn't let her down. As they circled back toward the center of the plaza, a commotion erupted near the fountain. A group of people had gathered, their voices raised in excitement and curiosity. Shawn's first thought was that someone might have spotted Lily's parents, and he quickened his pace, pulling her along with him. When they reached the edge of the crowd, he realized the attention wasn't on Lily's parents, or on them at all. Instead, it was focused on a man in the center of the group who was gesturing animatedly and shouting into his phone. Shawn couldn't make out what the man was saying, but he caught a few words here and there. Lost child, park, and danger. His stomach sank as he realized the man was talking about them. He could feel the shift in the crowd's energy, the way their gazes darted between him and Lily. Whispers spread like wildfire. The words kidnapping and suspicious carried on the breeze. Shawn's chest tightened, and he instinctively pulled Lily closer. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion. "What's happening?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about," Shawn said, his voice calm despite the storm brewing around them. "Stay close to me, all right?" Before he could decide on a course of action, a voice called out from the crowd, "Hey, isn't that P. Diddy?" Shawn froze, caught off guard by the unexpected recognition. The murmurs in the crowd shifted, curiosity replacing suspicion. A few people pulled out their phones, their screens glowing as they snapped pictures and recorded videos. "It is him," someone else said, their voice tinged with excitement. That's Shawn Combs. The tension in the air began to dissolve as people realized who he was. Shawn felt a mixture of relief and frustration. On one hand, the recognition might diffuse the situation. On the other, it turned the focus away from what really mattered: finding Lily's parents. The man who had been shouting into his phone approached cautiously, his expression a mix of apology and embarrassment. "Sorry, man," he said, holding up his hands. "I didn't realize it was you." Shawn nodded, his jaw tight. "It's fine," he said curtly. "But this little girl needs to find her parents. Can we focus on that?" The man nodded quickly, his face reddening. "Of course. Does anyone know where her parents might be?" he called out to the crowd. The murmurs started again, this time filled with genuine concern. People began to ask questions, offering suggestions and ideas. A woman near the edge of the group pulled out her phone and called park security, explaining the situation. Another man approached Shawn with a bottle of water for Lily, who accepted it shyly. Shawn felt a flicker of hope. For the first time that night, it felt like they weren't alone in this. The murmurs of the crowd filled the plaza like a low hum, but Shawn was focused solely on the small hand gripping his. Lily stood close to him, her eyes darting nervously between the sea of strangers. While the recognition of his identity had shifted the crowd's energy from suspicion to curiosity, Shawn knew that their real objective, finding Lily's parents, was far from complete. The man who had called out Shawn's name turned back to him with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry for causing a scene, man. I was just, well, you know how it is these days. People are always on edge." Shawn forced a tight smile and nodded, though the tension in his chest didn't ease. "It's all right," he said, though his tone left little room for elaboration. "But we really need to get her back to her parents." Another voice piped up from the crowd. "What does her mom look like? Maybe someone here saw her." Lily looked up at Shawn, her brows furrowed. "She has brown hair," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the chatter. "And she's wearing a blue dress. Daddy's wearing a white shirt." Shawn relayed the description to the growing group of onlookers. Some nodded, murmuring among themselves, while others pulled out their phones to text or call friends who might be in the area. The crowd's willingness to help was a relief, but it also heightened the urgency Shawn felt. Lily's exhaustion was evident in the way her shoulders sagged, and her earlier energy seemed to have drained completely. "Let's sit down for a minute," Shawn said, guiding Lily to a nearby bench. She climbed up and leaned against his side, her small head resting on his arm. Shawn stroked her curls absently, his thoughts racing. He needed a more direct solution. A woman approached cautiously, holding her phone to her ear. "I just talked to security," she said. "They're sending someone over to help. They'll coordinate with anyone who's reported a missing child." "Thank you," Shawn said, his voice sincere. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some offering Shawn encouraging words as they left, while others stayed nearby, ready to help if needed. Lily's breathing grew steadier, and when Shawn glanced down, he realized she had dozed off against his arm. Her lashes rested softly against her cheeks, and the tension in her tiny frame had eased. For the first time that evening, she looked peaceful. Shawn's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the quiet moment. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake Lily, and pulled it out. The screen displayed an unknown number, but something told him to answer. "Hello?" he said quietly. A frantic voice came through the line. "Is this Shawn Combs? My name is Rebecca. I think you have my daughter, Lily." Relief washed over him like a wave. "Yes, she's here with me. She's safe," Shawn assured her quickly. "She fell asleep, but she's okay." There was a muffled sob on the other end of the line. "Oh, thank God," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. "Where are you? We've been searching everywhere." "We're in the main plaza, near the fountain," Shawn said. "Park security should be here soon to help, but you can come straight here." "We're on our way," Rebecca said. Thank you so much." The call ended, and Shawn let out a long breath. He looked down at Lily, who was still sound asleep, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. The knot of worry that had been tightening in his chest all evening began to loosen. "Hey," someone said softly. It was the woman who had called security earlier. "Everything okay?" Shawn nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Her parents are on their way." "That's wonderful," the woman said, her expression brightening. "You did a good thing tonight." Shawn didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at Lily, thinking about the choices he'd made throughout the evening. He hadn't hesitated to help her, but the obstacles they'd faced, the suspicion, the fear, the confrontation with the officer, had been a stark reminder of the challenges that came with simply trying to do the right thing. A few minutes later, a commotion near the edge of the plaza caught Shawn's attention. A couple was hurrying toward them, their expressions a mix of relief and desperation. Rebecca, with her brown hair pulled back into a ponytail and her blue dress wrinkled from the evening's ordeal, reached the bench first. Daniel, in his white shirt, was right behind her. "Lily!" Rebecca cried, dropping to her knees beside the bench. Her voice woke the girl, who blinked sleepily before her face lit up with recognition. "Mommy!" Lily threw herself into Rebecca's arms, her small hands clutching at her mother's dress. Rebecca held her tightly, tears streaming down her face as she murmured words of comfort and relief. Daniel knelt beside them, wrapping both of them in his arms. Shawn stepped back, giving them space, but unable to stop the small smile that tugged at his lips. The sight of the family reunited was a balm to the exhaustion that had settled deep in his bones. After a few moments, Rebecca looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much for taking care of her." "I'm just glad she's safe," Shawn said simply. Daniel stood and extended a hand. "We can't thank you enough," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "If there's ever anything we can do to repay you—" "You don't need to worry about that," Shawn said, shaking his hand firmly. "Just take care of her." Rebecca stood, still holding Lily tightly, and looked at him with a mix of awe and gratitude. "You're a good man," she said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found her." Shawn nodded, his throat taut with emotion. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he simply offered a small smile. As the family began to make their way out of the plaza, Lily looked back over Rebecca's shoulder. She waved to Shawn, her small hand moving slowly but deliberately. "Bye, Shawn," she called softly. "Bye, Lily," Shawn said, his voice quiet but steady. He watched as they disappeared into the night, the weight of the evening lifting with each step they took. Shawn stayed on the bench for a while after they were gone, his thoughts swirling. The events of the night had tested him in ways he hadn't expected, but they had also reminded him of the importance of kindness, of doing what was right even when it wasn't easy. Eventually, he rose and began to make his way home, the city lights guiding him forward. The night felt quieter now, the air cooler, and though his body was tired, his heart felt lighter. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but for now he was content to know that Lily was safe and back where she belonged. The night after the reunion was quiet for Shawn, but his mind buzzed with unresolved thoughts. The image of Lily waving goodbye stayed with him, but it wasn't the relief of her safety that lingered the most. It was everything else. The officer's suspicion, the hesitant stares of strangers, and the whispers in the crowd about his motives gnawed at him. Despite doing the right thing, he had been judged, doubted, and nearly accused. He knew this wasn't a unique experience, but its weight felt particularly heavy this time. Shawn sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. The usual flood of notifications from his social media accounts waited for his attention. He opened his camera app, the screen reflecting his tired eyes and the furrow in his brow. For a long moment, he debated whether to speak about the night's events. He wasn't one to shy away from difficult conversations, but this was different. This was personal. Finally, he hit the record button. The words came slowly at first, but then they began to flow. "Tonight, I met a little girl named Lily," he began. "She was lost in the park, separated from her parents. She was scared, confused, and all alone. I did what anyone should do. I helped her. I stayed with her until we found her parents. It should have been that simple." He paused, his hands gripping the phone tightly. But it wasn't. On the way, I was stopped by a police officer who didn't see a man helping a child. He saw a black man holding the hand of a white girl and decided that was enough to pull a gun. Even after I explained, even after Lily herself told him I was helping her, I was treated like a suspect. Shawn looked directly into the camera, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "That's the world we live in. A world where the color of my skin can turn a simple act of kindness into something dangerous. A world where I have to prove my humanity over and over again." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "I'm sharing this because it's not just my story. It's the story of so many others who face suspicion, prejudice, and judgment every day. It's not okay, and it won't change unless we talk about it." Shawn ended the recording and sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling over him. Then, with a deep breath, he uploaded the video to his social media accounts. He didn't add a caption or hashtags. He didn't need to. The story spoke for itself. The response was immediate. Within hours, the video had thousands of views, then tens of thousands. Comments poured in from people all over the world. Some expressing outrage and support, others denying his experience or questioning his intentions. Shawn expected the backlash, but he didn't let it deter him. For every negative comment, there were dozens more that validated his message. The following day, Shawn's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. News outlets picked up the story, and interview requests began flooding in. He declined most of them, choosing instead to focus on amplifying the voices of others who shared their experiences in response to his post. He retweeted stories of discrimination, shared resources for combating systemic racism, and engaged with followers in thoughtful discussions. One of the messages that caught his attention came from a mother. She wrote about how the video had opened her eyes to her own unconscious biases. "I'm embarrassed to admit it," she wrote, "but if I had seen you with Lily in the park, I might have felt the same suspicion as that officer. Your story made me realize how unfair and harmful those instincts are. Thank you for helping me see that." Shawn read the message twice, his chest tightening with a mix of emotions. It was exactly the kind of impact he had hoped for, but it also highlighted how deeply ingrained prejudice could be, even in well-meaning people. Later that week, Shawn held a press conference to address the growing attention his story had received. Dressed in a tailored suit, he stood behind the podium, his demeanor calm but resolute. Cameras flashed as reporters leaned forward, their pens poised. "I didn't share my story for sympathy," Shawn began. "I shared it because it's a reality that too many people face. I want to use this moment to start a conversation, not just about what happened to me, but about the broader issues that allow these kinds of situations to happen." He went on to announce the creation of a new initiative, the Unity and Equity Foundation. Its mission would be to provide resources, education, and support for individuals and communities affected by racial bias. Shawn outlined plans for workshops on cultural competence, funding for grassroots organizations, and scholarships for young leaders working to promote equality. "This foundation isn't just about addressing problems," Shawn said. "It's about building solutions. It's about creating a world where no one has to prove their worth or humanity because of the way they look." The room erupted in applause. Shawn stepped back from the podium, his expression somber but determined. He knew the work ahead would be challenging, but he was ready for it. In the days that followed, the foundation gained momentum. Celebrities, activists, and ordinary people rallied behind the cause, donating money and resources to support its mission. Shawn worked tirelessly, meeting with community leaders, speaking at events, and using his platform to push for change. Despite the progress, not everyone was on board. Shawn received hate mail and threats, along with criticism from those who accused him of playing the victim or stirring up division. He met the negativity with the same calm resolve he had shown during his encounter with the officer. "Change is uncomfortable," he said in an interview, "but discomfort is necessary if we want to grow." One evening, as Shawn sat in his office reviewing proposals for the foundation, his assistant knocked on the door. "You have a visitor," she said. Shawn looked up, surprised. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Rebecca. She's with her daughter, Lily." Shawn's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Send them in." Rebecca entered, holding Lily's hand. The little girl beamed when she saw Shawn and ran toward him. "Shawn!" she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Hey, kiddo," Shawn said, smiling as he knelt down to hug her. "How are you?" "I'm good," Lily said. "Mommy said we came to say thank you." Rebecca stepped forward, her expression warm but serious. "We saw what you've been doing," she said. "The foundation, the interviews, it's incredible. We wanted to let you know how much we appreciate you, not just for helping Lily, but for everything else." Shawn smiled. "It means a lot to hear that. Thank you." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "Lily wanted to give you something." The little girl pulled a small drawing from her pocket and handed it to Shawn. It was a crayon illustration of a man holding a little girl's hand, surrounded by bright colors and smiling faces. At the top, in shaky letters, were the words, "Thank you, Shawn." Shawn felt a lump rise in his throat. "This is amazing," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to frame it and put it on my wall." Lily grinned, clearly proud of her work. "Really?" "Really," Shawn said. "This is the best gift I've ever gotten." As they left, Shawn sat back in his chair, holding the drawing. For all the challenges and setbacks, moments like this reminded him why he had started this journey. Change was slow and difficult, but it was worth it. Shawn set the drawing on his desk, his resolve stronger than ever. There was still so much to do, but he was ready. Together, with people like Rebecca and Lily, he believed they could build a better world, one step at a time. The framed drawing of Shawn and Lily sat prominently on his desk, a splash of color against the polished wood. It had become more than a keepsake. It was a reminder of the journey that had begun that night in the park. As Shawn leaned back in his chair, gazing at the childlike crayon strokes, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a fleeting moment in his life. It was the start of something bigger. The Unity and Equity Foundation had gained incredible momentum since its launch. Media outlets continued to cover its progress, highlighting stories of individuals who had benefited from its programs. Shawn's days were filled with meetings, interviews, and brainstorming sessions with his team. Yet, amidst the chaos, he made it a point to stay grounded, reminding himself of the little girl who had sparked this movement. One morning, Shawn sat in his office reviewing grant proposals for community projects. The foundation had received hundreds of submissions from activists, educators, and local leaders seeking support for initiatives aimed at promoting racial equity. Each proposal represented a piece of the larger puzzle, and Shawn read them all carefully, taking notes and highlighting key points. His assistant knocked on the door, interrupting his focus. "Shawn, there's a call for you on line 2. It's Rebecca and Lily." A smile spread across Shawn's face. "Thanks, I'll take it." He picked up the phone, and Lily's cheerful voice immediately greeted him. "Hi, Shawn." "Hey, Lily," Shawn replied, leaning back in his chair. "How's my favorite artist doing?" "I'm good. Mommy said I can go to art camp this summer," she said excitedly. "That's amazing," Shawn said. "You'll have to send me one of your masterpieces when you're done." "I will," Lily promised, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Rebecca came on the line next, her tone warm. "Hi, Shawn. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Lily's been talking about you nonstop since we saw you last." "I'm doing well," Shawn said, "keeping busy, but it's all good work. How about you?" "We're good," Rebecca said. "I've been following everything you're doing with the foundation. It's incredible, Shawn. Really inspiring." Shawn felt a flush of gratitude. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." There was a brief pause before Rebecca spoke again. "Actually, there's something else I wanted to tell you. After what happened that night, I started thinking about how I can make a difference too. I've been volunteering with a local organization that works with underserved communities, and it's been really rewarding." "That's amazing, Rebecca," Shawn said sincerely. "It's people like you who make this work meaningful." They chatted for a while longer before saying their goodbyes. As Shawn hung up the phone, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The ripple effects of that night were spreading, touching lives in ways he hadn't anticipated. Later that week, Shawn attended a town hall event hosted by the foundation. The room was packed with people from all walks of life. Activists, community leaders, parents, and students, each eager to share their experiences and ideas. The energy was palpable, a mix of hope and determination that filled the space. Shawn took the stage to a round of applause. He waited for the room to quiet before speaking, his voice steady and resonant. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "This foundation exists because of people like you, people who refuse to accept the status quo, who believe in the power of change. Tonight, I want to hear your stories, your challenges, and your ideas. Together, we can create solutions that will make a lasting impact." For the next 2 hours, Shawn listened as attendees shared their experiences with prejudice and inequality. Some spoke about the struggles they faced in their personal lives, while others highlighted systemic issues that needed urgent attention. Shawn took notes, his mind racing with possibilities for new initiatives and partnerships. One story in particular stood out to him. A young woman named Jasmine, a recent college graduate, spoke about her efforts to bring diversity training to her former high school. Despite resistance from some parents and faculty members, she had managed to implement a pilot program that was already showing promising results. People are starting to have conversations they never would have had before, Jasmine said, her voice trembling with emotion. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Shawn felt a surge of pride as he listened to her. This was exactly the kind of change he hoped to inspire. Grassroots efforts led by passionate individuals willing to challenge the status quo. After the event, Shawn approached Jasmine to thank her personally. "What you're doing is incredible," he said. "If there's anything the foundation can do to support your work, let me know." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Really? That would mean so much. Thank you." Shawn nodded. "Keep up the great work. You're making a difference." As the weeks turned into months, the foundation continued to grow. Shawn's team expanded, bringing on experts in education, law enforcement reform, and community development. Together, they launched programs that addressed a wide range of issues, from implicit bias training for police officers to mentorship opportunities for young people of color. One of the most significant milestones came when the foundation partnered with a national advocacy group to host a summit on racial equity. The event drew attendees from across the country, including policymakers, educators, and activists. Shawn delivered the keynote address, sharing his vision for a more inclusive and equitable society. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he told the audience. "It happens one conversation, one action, one choice at a time. Each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. Together, those small actions add up to something extraordinary." The audience erupted in applause, and Shawn felt a swell of hope. This was just the beginning. One evening, as Shawn sat in his office reflecting on the foundation's progress, he received a message from Rebecca. It was a photo of Lily holding up another drawing, this one depicting a group of people holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, Lily had written, "Together we're stronger." Shawn smiled as he set the phone down. The words resonated deeply with him, encapsulating the heart of everything he had been working toward. The journey wasn't over, but with every step, he felt more certain that they were moving in the right direction. The framed drawing on his desk seemed to glow under the soft light of his desk lamp. Shawn reached out and touched its edge, a small smile playing on his lips. Lily's simple act of trust that night had sparked something far greater than either of them could have imagined. As he leaned back in his chair, Shawn allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. He thought about the countless lives that would be touched by the foundation's work, the conversations it would spark, and the barriers it would break down. And, for the first time in a long time, he felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead was long, but it was one he was ready to walk. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful tales, and share this video with someone who might need it. Check out our channel for other captivating stories, and stay tuned for what's next.